Hi everybody, my name is Raven Craig. I am the campus health educator for Humboldt State University, and this presentation is for people participating in activities at HSU to meet the alcohol and other drug requirement of training. And this is titled Humboldt Haze. Humboldt Haze is our alcohol and other drug education program here at Humboldt State University. So Humboldt Haze really was started by students for students to educate around alcohol and drug use and culture in our community. And the phrase really is all about clearing the air around alcohol and other drug use. This is a harm reduction based health education program. So as a health education program, we are based in ideas of social justice, which means that our goal is to meet people where they're at in their process of learning about their bodies and about engaging with their health and their community, and give people all of the information that they need in order to make good choices. Harm reduction also means reducing harm and helping people be safer. That doesn't mean that we educate about things like abstinence or never doing drugs or alcohol. People are going to make the choices that they make, and we're hoping to give you information so that you make a safe and responsible choice. And that information comes from a judgment-free environment, and an environment and an education lens that takes into account issues of diversity and racism, sexism, classism, things like that. And so we want you to have a good plan going into things, but we also know that you are going to be going into things. So a big part of harm reduction is kind of understanding what your limits are and kind of what the dangers are that's out there. There's lots of different kinds of harm reduction when it comes with alcohol and other drugs or to other things in life. I mean, mask wearing is a harm reduction strategy. So is condom usage is a harm reduction strategy. There's all sorts of things that are harm reduction strategies. And so the tools that I'm presenting are just information for you so you can build your own strategies around harm reduction and then also maybe engage with us about how to build those strategies. And so the first thing I want to talk about was binge drinking. This is normally I would ask you all what you think binge drinking is, but binge drinking is the idea that somebody might be drinking to get drunk. So oftentimes it's measured scientifically or, in health sciences off of a certain number of drinks per hour based off of kind of weight. But really it's the idea of drinking a lot of alcohol over a short period of time, and basically drinking to get messed up. It's really common amongst college age individuals, not just people who are in college, but people who are of age to be around starting and being in college. And it tends not to happen as much later or earlier in life. Binge drinking doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is an alcoholic, but because of that, it often means that there are kind of harmful repercussions to binge drinking. So by drinking a lot over a short period of time, you're opening your body up to more significant harm because you're not adjusted to alcohol use and you might not know what your limits are. And so one of the things that's really important about engaging in alcohol and drinking is to know what your body can handle, and also maybe being realistic about why you're drinking and if there's an emotional component or if it's a social component. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Okay, so one part of this is understanding the biphasic response. When alcohol come back to get us. So when drinking, drinking is a depressant on our systems, which means that it slows our heart rates down. It causes us to react to things slower. It can cause brief moments of kind of euphoria, but it also often ends with crashes. And so the biphasic response is a way to kind of understand how alcohol works on our system over time. And so if you're drinking and you're not knowing how much alcohol you're putting into your body very quickly, it can react over time even after you've stopped drinking. And so the alcohol's biphasic effect. So as time goes on, you may continue drinking, or you might have at some point stopped drinking. But there's kind of a point of diminishing returns for alcohol. So oftentimes, especially if we're in the act of drinking and our inhibitions are lowered and our emotional intelligence isn't super high, or our intelligence isn't super high, so we're not as aware of our surroundings, right? So we're drinking, we're having a good time, right? And so if you see on this slope, that point of diminishing returns, we're drinking, we're having a time, things are feeling pretty good. We may stop drinking, and if we've been binge drinking, we already have a lot of alcohol in our system, right? Or we may continue drinking, right? Trying to kind of maintain that. The idea being that, like, the drunker I get, the more fun I'm going to have. And that's not always true. So the high point is like, I'm a good dancer, things are going great, me and my friends are having an awesome time. And then what happens is that there is a very sharp drop off. And if you've ever if you've ever drank before, been around people who are drinking before, you may have seen this. I mean, like, it can be anything from like crying in the bathroom, or texting an ex, or, you know, being emotionally inconsolable. These are the things that happen to us when our body's under depressant. Like, it can be really traumatic. Sometimes that dysphoria is negative in ways that are more significant physically than just, you know, a crying jag and wanting to listen to really sad music. It can be things like vomiting. It could be things like blacking out, right, or passing out. And so that's when we get into the effect of alcohol poisoning, which I'll talk about later too. But just so you know, there is like a sweet spot, and it's really hard to maintain that if you're not doing things like counting your drinks or knowing how much calorie input you're having. And so the best thing to do is to go slow, take your time, think about what you're drinking, and to really be responsible with it. You know, then you can kind of maintain the good feelings and kind of take care of yourself, stop drinking, drink water, you know, get rest, things like that, in order to help sustain your well-being. Okay, so campus policies surrounding ATOD. So just a note that things you need to know as student leaders on campus. Obviously, some of these things are less meaningful when we're not actually planning physical events, but you're going to need to know about them eventually. So campus is a completely smoke-free environment. No cigarettes, no e-cigs, no vape pen, nothing. That is true for not just campus, it's also true for the city of Arcata. And so City of Arcata has a policy where you have to be like physically moving in order to be allowed to smoke in Arcata. And so know that you're not allowed to smoke at all on campus. That's something that's important to note for people who, if you are bringing somebody to come visit campus. Be really careful about the pictures you're posting to social media. If you are under the age of 21 and you are posting pictures of you with a bunch of red Solo cups, you never know who's going to see that, and all sorts of things. I have some, you know, funny stories about how this happens. As a person who supervised staff on campus, know that we see the things that you guys do, and we also know that you sometimes see the things we do. We live in a socially connected world, and so be really aware of how things are seen and how people can react to them. No substances at campus events. There are ways to get alcohol at campus events, legal substances like alcohol at campus events, but it's very complex. If you have questions about that, you can check in with Molly. The res halls, we do have something that's called a Good Samaritan policy. So this policy is the idea that if somebody has been drinking or doing other kinds of substances, other kinds of drugs, and they need medical attention, that if you or if somebody gets the medical attention, they that action will be looked at when talking about what kind of disciplinary actions will be taken against that person. So getting somebody's help is more important than getting somebody in trouble. And so by calling an ambulance and making sure that people get to the hospital if they are in serious condition or if they need any kind of assistance, that's way more significant and than, like who's going to be getting in trouble. And so this policy is there in place to encourage people to get help when they need help. So it's also against campus policy to be intoxicated in public on any part of campus, and so that falls for the rest of campus. And it's also against campus policy and the law to sell drugs on campus. I will say that it kind of goes without saying at this point, but marijuana is also included in the list of things that isn't allowed on campus, and I'm going to be talking about that in. Speaking of marijuana, it's important that we touch base on cannabis. So as I said, even though cannabis is a legal substance to do recreationally in California and medically in California, it's not allowed on HSU's campus or in the residence halls because it's illegal under federal law, and we receive federal funds. And so just know that you can still be cited on campus for cannabis. Cannabis, as far as like harm goes, it's a relatively safe substance. I mean, but there are some negative consequences that can have. So it can affect cognitive abilities, memory, and lung health. Lung health in particular is something that we're really conscious of right now. Smoking substances and is not super safe when there is a pandemic that involving kind of lung health and our ability to breathe. And so just be aware of that. There's also kind of like adages that you may hear about marijuana that aren't necessarily true. So things like if you study high, and if you go to class high, then you should take your test high because you'll do better. Scientific studies don't show that that necessarily is true. In fact, it's very, very false. Sustained marijuana usage can affect your short-term memory. And so just be aware and be careful that can have an effect on you. The smell, so when we're in classroom situations or, sharing rooms, the smell can make people uncomfortable or sick. And so it is kind of a community respect thing to not smell like weed all the time. And then the other one that I have on here is Wipe the Pipe, which is all about kind of sharing germs and if you are sharing marijuana, to be really aware that you're sharing a lot of germs by doing that, and that can cause colds and flus. I think at this point in the world, we're all really aware of how germs function, and keeping your weed to yourself may be a good idea, and to be really cognizant about kind of the people you're around and how many people you're around is very important. All right, so this section's all about planning a party. And the first thing I want to say is don't. Normally, during a normal school year, I would love to talk you all through the safety, and I'm going to go through all of the slides, but of party hosting and going to house parties in college. But the reality is house parties are not safe during a pandemic, and you should not be going to them, and you should not be hosting them. And there are other ways to socialize, and until things change, it's really important to be aware of that. And so I really kind of wanted to put a big old don't over the top of this. But as a harm reduction strategy, if you're going to be doing those things, try to keep them under less than 10 people, create bubbles of people that you're spending time with, and those are the only people you're spending time with. Those are harm reduction strategies as well. And so if you are planning a party, it's really important to note that if you are in Humboldt County, if you are in Arcata or Eureka or McKinleyville, that you talk to your neighbors. We live in close areas and, try to get to know your neighbors, make sure that they know what's going on. It's less likely that somebody's going to call the cops on you if, you've talked to them. Um, Thursday is a weeknight. I know that a lot of times, especially as we get in our upper class areas, we get to the point where we don't have Friday classes anymore, but Thursdays are still a weeknight, and so be aware of that and be aware of the people around you. Minors can physically drink, especially they can physically drink waters, but they cannot legally drink alcohol. And if you are hosting a party and there are minors at your party and they get drunk and then something happens to them, you can be legally responsible for the things that happen to them. And so it is in your best interest and everybody's best interest for you to card if you're going to be having people over at your house. It's in your best interest to take care of the people who are in your home and to make sure nothing happens to them by organizing safe rides, being okay with letting people crash, using check-it strategies to make sure that that people aren't manipulating or harming other people who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Those are your responsibilities as somebody who decides to host a party in your space. And so I really would like everybody to think about that and to take that on as a party hoster. And really explicit, don't advertise. Small kickbacks are better than strangers in your house. Don't advertise your party on social media. Don't try to, it could be that locals or high school students end up at your parties if you do it that way. And, things can go wrong when that happens in particular. And it's really important to keep it amongst your friends and to make sure that you are safe and everybody's safe, and then also that you are not legally responsible for things if they go awry. So another thing to keep in mind is the themes of your parties. I know this is an alcohol and other drug presentation, but just to plug that, it's really great when parties don't have terrible racist or cultural identity-based themes. There are lots of good themes for parties that don't have anything to do with making other people feel like garbage. And so avoid hosting parties that encourage people to do things like blackface or brownface, and be kind of really aware of the fact that oftentimes that information gets out and it could be life ruining. It's just something to keep in mind. Normally I would do some brainstorming sessions about what some good party themes are good, what's a good joke that isn't a terrible joke. But obviously I'm not with you, but if you think about it, there are lots of things to host parties about that are funny and interesting and not awful. So just be really aware of that. Okay, so mixing it up. So before getting into mixing it up, I do wanted to take a brief mention of the other kinds of drugs other than alcohol and marijuana that you may have come across. Things like hallucinogens, LSD, Molly. So there are lots of different types of substances that people may or may not choose to put in their bodies. And it can be hard to recognize if something is safe or something is gonna go the way you want it to. It's always important to have a plan. And maybe if you are gonna be doing certain kinds of substances, to get a testing kit, so you can get testing kits to test different kind of drugs to make sure that the actual substance that you think they are. If you have questions about any of those really specific types of things, please reach out to me. I don't have time in this presentation to go through kind of what all of that looks like. I do not report to campus police or to the dean of students office when people come to ask me questions about alcohol and other drug use. And that's not my job. I as a health educator on campus, I have to maintain confidentiality in those conversations. And so I'm more than happy to talk to people about their needs, If you want to talk about those things and you don't want to talk about them like over Zoom, we can schedule phone calls. And so know that even while campus is physically closed, I'm here to talk to you about those things. So mixing it up. So if you choose to take one or more substance, make sure to do the research on how things might react with one another. And if you have questions about that, I can help you kind of find where the research is, get a testing kit, which I already kind of mentioned, and then know how much of each substance you're taking, drink plenty of water and food, know your limits, and also, have a backup plan, like have somebody who's there to help take care of you. And if you're always needing to be taken care of when doing alcohol or the drugs or any other kind of partying scenario, you may want to think about how you might take care of somebody else too. So don't always be the person who's under the influence. Always, maybe tap out and be the sober sister every once in a while. So just know that it kind of goes both ways. Okay. So misuse and emergencies. So emergency response. So alcohol poisoning is real and life-threatening. If you see somebody who has any of the symptoms of alcohol poisoning, please call for help right away. It can be complicated. Calling 911, it can be complicated. Calling police, it always has been. This isn't new. And so I really want to emphasize that if you're calling 911 and asking for an ambulance, very specifically, is very different. And really getting people emergency help when they need it is important. And if you want to talk more in depth about strategies and things you can do to keep your community safe, outside of that, when it's maybe not as much of a medical emergency, please reach out to me and we can talk about that in more depth. So alcohol poisoning. So this is ways to recognize it. This is the easiest way I found to recognize alcohol poisoning. So can't stand. So the person's not able to hold up their own body weight. Can't stop throwing up. So if they're throwing up and they're unable to keep anything down, usually even just one throw up is alcohol poisoning. Can't wake up. So they're semi-conscious or passed out, so they're unable to respond to stimulus. If you've ever blacked out, it's likely that you had alcohol poisoning. And it can be very dangerous. So these are the things to look for. If you have somebody who has even just one of these, who has been taking any kind of substance, you should probably get them help immediately. So one thing that we can do is to help folks is to put them in the recovery position. So putting somebody in the recovery position will keep their airway clear and open. It also ensures that any vomit or fluid won't cause them to choke. This is really great, a way to make sure somebody stays safe until more help can come. This is for people who are already breathing and who you're waiting for help to come from. So if somebody is not breathing or things like that, this may not be as helpful, but, and I'm not going to be educating around CPR or things like that, but this is for if somebody's waiting for help and they can be breathing.
Move away any objects that could get in their way. Kneel on the floor to one side of the person. Place the person's arm that is nearest you at a right angle to their body, so it is bent at the elbow with the hand pointing upwards. This will keep it out of the way for when you roll them over. Gently pick up their other hand with your palm against theirs. Now, place the back of their hand onto their opposite cheek. Keep your hand there to guide and support their head as you roll them. Now, use your other arm to reach across to the person's knee that is furthest from you, and pull it up until their leg is bent and their foot is flat on the floor. Now, with your hand still on the person's knee, pull their knee towards you so they roll over onto their side, facing you. The person's body weight should help them to roll over quite easily. Move their bent leg that is nearest you away from their body so that it is resting on the floor. Lastly, gently raise their chin to tilt their head back slightly, as this will open up their airway and help them to breathe. Check that nothing is blocking their airway for example, any food. If there is an obstruction, remove this if you can do so safely. Now, let's...
All right, so that was the recovery position. It's a great tool to know about. I will include the link to the video and I'll send it along with this presentation. So if you want to watch it in more depth or watch it again, you can. I encourage people to practice and so just let me know if you have any questions about that. So a couple of things that I also wanted to note is that if somebody is misusing or is having an addiction, has an addiction issue or a mental health issue, which could be related to drugs or alcohol, could not be related to drugs or alcohol, there are things to watch out for. And so as people who are in student leadership positions and as things like club leaders, you may come across people who need assistance with this. They may need outreach, and so I want you to have tools to know what to do and what to look for. And so some of the things that you might come across are things like missing or skipping class. Difficulty making connections, needing substances to be social. So this is like a person who won't go to a party unless there's drugs or alcohol there. That can be a sign that something's going on with them. Let's see, mixing a lot of substances, sleeping a lot during the day, rapid mood swings, lying, stealing, decreased appetite, forgetfulness, dramatic changes in weight. These can all also be signs of mental health issues. We do a whole presentation. It's about, it's anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours long on suicide prevention. So we're going to be offering those digitally throughout the semester, but we can also schedule specific ones for your group. So if your group would like to have a suicide prevention based workshop, we can do that for you. But these are all signs of kind of mental health issues too. And so if somebody has any of these signs, reach out to them. And if you're not super close to them, maybe reach out to the people around them. You can even, reach out to me. The Dean of Students Office has a self-report and a report form on their website that you can report people that you're concerned about. And that doesn't mean you're getting them in trouble. It means you're connecting them to help. And so if you want to learn more about those resources and how to help people who are in need, please reach out to me and I will be happy to schedule an event for your group or give you the schedule of the events that we will be hosting digitally for fall 2020. So the next section is very brief, and I just wanted to touch briefly on drug culture. So when you think of Humboldt County or HSU, and somebody were to say the phrase drug culture, is there anything specifically that would come to mind? Of course there is, and it would be very bad of us to not admit or to take into account the issues of kind of drug culture and the cannabis industry and how that has had an effect on our institution and our community. And so what I mean by that is that oftentimes when people will say that they're going to Humboldt State University, it'll come up in conversation that they, like for example, when I told my grandfather when I was coming to Humboldt State as a student, he was like, is there something you need to tell me? Referring specifically to cannabis and to marijuana culture. The reality was I came to HSU because it was as far away as I can get from Southern California without leaving the state, right? And it wasn't because of marijuana. But because of the prevalence of cannabis culture in Humboldt County, we have to be aware of it and to identify it and to talk about it when we talk about alcohol and other drug use. And so a part of our outreach as educators is to talk about what that means for students in this community and to be really aware about educating, about navigating that culture. And so we do that through presentations and we do it through workshops and things like that. But I just wanted to kind of plug it here to say, like, we know, and we're not unaware, and that if you had something in particular that you thought we should be talking about or that you wanted to talk about with us, please let us know. Okay, so what makes you, and by you I mean students, most likely to use alcohol and other drugs? So research shows us that the reason why most people use alcohol and other drugs when they're in college is to feel like they are socially accepted and that they're having fun. It's about the fear of missing out, and it's about feeling like they're a part of something. And so the reason why I bring this up is because, we can talk about all the other reasons why people use alcohol and other drugs, like stress or anxiety or depression, things like that. But the one that you as student leaders have the most control over is creating environments where people feel like they are welcome and that they can have fun and be a part of something new without having substances be a part of that. So you have the ability to create spaces where people can create community and not have to worry about being drunk or high in order to feel a part of that community. So while, there are lots of different choices that people are going to make about their bodies and about hanging out and things like that. The cool thing about the stuff that you guys do is that you create, micro communities at HSU that are accepting and wonderful and lovely. And so I just wanted to thank you for that work, and know that you are addressing this biggest question by creating those welcoming spaces. So thank you. So just a note about the services that we provide. So once again, I'm Raven. I'm the health educator at campus. I supervise a couple of different programs. The peer health education program is the one that most directly relates to this presentation. But I also supervise the OSNAP Student Food Pantry, and we will be offering services in the fall. And so you can find all of that information on the OSNAP website, which is hsusnap.org, and also include those links in the video too. But as far as AOD stuff goes, the peer health educators, which I also supervise, are a group of student educators. We usually put on things like events, and then we also do CIYs, which are skill shops, the library, all around different health issues. And we do ones around alcohol and other drugs. We have, and then, when campus is back open, we provide merch and we do event planning and support around alcohol and drug use. And also you can meet one-on-one with students, and we're going to be doing those meetings digitally as well, to talk about information about alcohol and other drugs and get non-judgmental peer support around things. And so they can help you out as well. And then you can also meet with me. I can help you find resources. I'm one of the few people on campus who you can come and talk to around issues of sexualized violence, and I do not have to report that. I can help you with wellness planning, and then also connect you to issues in the community. I also am an ambassador for the Health Center and the Counseling Center, so if you have questions about how the Health Center is functioning or about the Counseling Center and that you're not really sure if you want to reach out directly to them, you can ask me questions as well. So please know that I'm available to you too. And then Counseling and Psychological Services, they do have an alcohol and harm reduction group, which is a really great group that meets and talks about AOD issues. It hasn't been scheduled as of recording this, but I'm sure I'll be able to include a link by the time that you get this to their schedule. And then they also offer counseling, and individual counseling specifically around alcohol and drug issues. And so you can call them, and that phone number is 24/7. It is a crisis line as well, so after hours it goes to a crisis line, but you can call them to set up an appointment for individual counseling. So yes. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. You can find information about all of our programs at humboldt.edu/health education. That's my office number, although I'm not physically in it. And once again, I'm Raven with an I, and I hope you all have a wonderful semester. Thanks.